Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to start working on the area that connects the alleyway to the docklands. I've already started by building the road that sits in front of the docklands to the alleyway via this T intersection with a railway level crossing. There'll be a warehouse that's going to be sitting in front of the wall here, so this entire lower side will be obscured from view. Any of the detail on this side of the red factory that I want to preserve, I had to move quite a bit upwards so that it would still be visible and not obstruct the next building, which will sit flush beside the red wall. This includes some of the windows and piping that I thought were cool looking and I really didn't want to lose. So the larger plan here is that there's going to be a set of buildings that kind of acts as a transition between the higher level here and the lower level, and this will continue on for at least a little bit further. On the other side of the road, at the corner, I'm going to add a restaurant for the workers, but for today I'm going to start with the first two buildings here. Creating this crossing was a bit tricky because the road height of the docklands doesn't match the height of the road in front of the large red factory, and it's something that I only discovered after I tried to connect them. I'm not sure how I made the mistake, but even in digital Lego, it proved to be a challenge to connect these two sections. It was off by just one plate, and I couldn't raise the road and sidewalk in front of the red building, or it would mess up the steps in front of the building, and everything was connected to the retaining wall and raised spur. It was complex. So what I ended up doing was to use the railway crossing to subtly hide the transition from the higher road to the lower road by lowering it an additional tile on the lower side of the road. So it's actually higher on the dockland side, but you barely actually notice because it's hidden by the railway crossing. You only see that one line of additional tiles, so that kind of worked out well. I guess looking back, I could have raised the entire alleyway up a tile. That would have been a pain. Lowering the dockland side would have been a simpler option, but I wanted to experiment on how to handle such height inconsistencies because they are naturally going to crop up, and I need a way to find elegant local solutions because raising and lowering entire sections of the layout isn't practical. Unlike the other sections of the layout that use concrete railway crossings, I wanted to use a wooden crossing in this section. It brings me back to when I was a kid, and just outside of downtown, there was this really large railway crossing that I would occasionally have to cross, and that was always fun. It was always really noisy and rickety and falling apart, but it was really cool. It had more tracks in this 2007 Google Street View picture, and they've since replaced it with an overpass, so it looks completely different than it was back then. Of course, in my city, this railway crossing is only 2 tracks wide, and uses tiles to simulate the wooden blocks. Not nearly as complex as I did for the road in front of the pier. For the first warehouse that would be placed here, I really wanted to create a building that has the window style where it's made up of a collection of small rectangular windows grouped together that are bordered on the top and bottom by brick and on the sides by concrete gray columns. Here's an example of what I mean. This is Detroit's old Packard plant. We see what would have been the windows here. In addition, I'm taking inspiration from this O-scale warehouse built by Brett Whalen. I also wanted a covered loading dock with a spur track, kind of like this one. This is a picture by another O-scale modeler who has the Facebook group called Industrial Models. This is my Lego version, and it's an old warehouse, and I used a mock sticker to mimic the look of old-style warehouses where the company name is printed on its walls. It's made up of multiple sections using light salmon bricks that are bordered by dark tan colored columns. On the first floor, there is a loading dock and spur track. The loading dock has this cool, rusty, corrugated shelter covering a relatively narrow dock. Coiling doors line the wall. There will be another building right beside this one, so the wall here at the end is temporary. At the front, there is a garage door that allows access to the entire length of the loading dock. The workers' entrance has stairs leading up to the main loading dock floor. The tracks that service this warehouse are really old and rickety. I think the crooked ties look really cool, and I first saw this technique on a channel called Revelbrick. The crooked railway ties are created by using gray jumper plates and tiles to allow for angular brown ties. This plus the green rounded plates that simulate weeds that you see growing on old railway tracks really adds to the feeling that the track is old. Initially, I had the second floor span the entire length of the building, but it looked a bit too boring, a bit too rectangle, and I didn't want to obscure too much of the red factory from this side of the view. So that's why I decided to shorten the second floor and make part of it an outside patio for the workers. I worked in an office in an old manufacturing building, and it had this exact setup, where the top floor stopped about halfway and the remaining side was turned into a neat little patio. It was insanely sweltering in the summers though. The top roof has these old school New York style water towers, and on the lower level, on the rear side, it has these interesting vents for an exhaust system. I got the inspiration while driving on an overpass in Buffalo, New York, a city with lots of cool industrial landscapes. I don't have a picture, so I built off my memory. Right beside Davidson's warehouse is a general-purpose manufacturing building that's 4 stories high. While it has no direct access to the road, I imagine it having access via a corridor that traverses the length of the neighboring warehouse, exiting at the road via the door at the front. The challenge here was to make the building exterior look interesting. I wanted to make the first floor have fully boarded up windows, but I was a bit concerned that the upper floors would look a bit too repetitive if they shared the same window pattern. I saw this interesting picture of a Victorian mill in Nottingham. It had these interesting wooden structures and hoists protruding out of the building. Not sure what it does or what it's used for, it just looks cool. So I added them to my building. More importantly, they're there to break up the face of the building and add more detail. Sometimes a flat face of a building is ideal, but in this case, where I'm going to have several buildings beside each other, if they all have flat faces, the whole area will look one-dimensional and boring. Just like the Davidson warehouse, the next building will bump up right beside it, so this wall is also temporary. Along this side, I have a space that can be best described as an air shaft. Little openings between or in the middle of buildings to allow windows to be built on what would normally not allow for a window, common in New York City. This allows for a sliver of light to illuminate this side of the building, and just like real shafts in NYC, this shaft is accumulating stale air and garbage. More specifically, it allowed me to add yet more detail on this side of the building, which, without the gap, would have just been bricked up right up to the red factory, and that would have been a bit boring. People have asked what era I model, and generally speaking, the factories look like they're from the late 80s and early 90s, but I'm not super strict on it. Other buildings, especially commercial and residential, and vehicles, will be more modern. However, it's for sure lunchtime. The warehouse workers are having a pizza, and maybe it's taking too long. Looks like everyone on this side is having a break too. Well, that's it for today's episode. In the next one, I'll probably be working on buildings that will finally fill up this huge empty space. I'm really excited for it. Thanks for watching.